Hi, everyone, and happy Monday. We are very excited to kick off the week with Emily Paxhia, co-founder and managing partner of Poseidon Investment Management. We are so excited to talk through what is going on in the ever-evolving cannabis landscape and, of course, get some updates on the lawsuit, which has been very exciting. I'm sure everyone's been following on X. Emily, thanks for joining. How are you doing? I know you've been busy. We were just talking in the pre-show a little bit. Cannabis never stops, never sleeps. I feel like it's almost worse than crypto in terms of the working hours. It's like constant, right? How are you doing?
Yeah, well, and I would argue that it's worse because we're actually building businesses, which requires
That is true.
people, not digits. But I'm a little grumpy about the
I
the way
get
that crypto's been embraced versus cannabis by the federal government. But that's a tangent.
That is fair. I feel like it is frustrating since I know most people probably know your history. You've been in the space for so long now and you've been constantly fighting, constantly being an advocate, constantly trying to move things forward. And then, yeah, I guess to have something which crypto really kind of came out kind of during the pandemic, really found that footing. So it is frustrating, I think, in general. But again, doesn't mean it's all over. Doesn't mean crypto has it. Cannabis is still here. We're still making a lot of progress. We will talk about it. I wanted to start maybe with actually, before I start, good reminder for anyone who's out there. If you guys have any comments, questions, feel free to throw them out. I see Stevie in there. Hey, Stevie.
Hey, Stevie.
Stevie, great to see you. But I feel like temperature check just to start, just a level set. We're Monday morning, fresh, relatively. How are we feeling so far? Cannabis based.
Mm-hmm. Monday morning, I feel like in our industry, it's like a standing sprint. So it's just really busy. I talk about this industry in terms of a tale of two markets. There's the public markets and the public market action, and then there's actually what's happening in the businesses. Now, that's true in many other sectors as well, but I feel like it's expressly divergent in our industry. So, I do feel for all the folks who live and breathe on just the public stock action around cannabis versus getting to understand what's going on in the underlying businesses. It's a lot of work. It's hard work. And we do talk about it as like, you never know where the next body blow is coming from next. But for us, I think a lot of the way that we keep pushing forward is that we get to see what goes on in building these companies, building this industry. I mean, our whole team has really been in the industry since 2014. We've been focusing on this since we started researching 2012, 2013. So when you see the long arc of something like that and the trajectory of a building industry, that's what really keeps you going.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that something that kind of allows you to take a breath in general, kind of separate yourself from what we're seeing in terms of market movements, all those different things, and actually see. So that's fantastic, which is great. Oh, look, awesome. Dan's in the mix as well, saying hey.
Hello.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. Does it also help? I feel like, again, working with your brother to have someone that's able to kind of, I don't know, you're able to bounce things off each other, kind of calm each other down. I feel like you guys are very different, but in a very compatible way. I feel like that helps work with a business. Does that help at all as well? Trying to just sort of stay sane as things have been a little bit wild, especially lately.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about our dad when it comes to how we, view running a business and being in the industry. He had a real take no prisoners mentality and no excuses mentality, and so we always just grew up with this attitude of if there's a problem, I'll solve it. Like we've got a way to. I can't believe I just quoted Ice Baby, but I think the attitude is we will always find a way to solve it. And, I joke that we're on a need to freak out basis, but, it really does come down. I was thinking about this all last week as we're chopping wood as a team and I couldn't do it without the team we have with Colin and Patrick. I mean, we all work incredibly hard. I think we all are true believers that we're building something incredible here. And I don't think we should ignore what just happened with the recognition about cannabis eclipsing daily use over alcohol. And by the way, the HHS in that massive memo articulated that they think that's a net benefit positive shift in consumer behavior. So, all of this I think you chop away at this for years and years and you have great teammates and you have people who believe in this together, but who are also appropriately skeptical through the process. And that's what makes it work. So, and then we laugh. We have to laugh. There's a lot of, yeah.
That's very fair. I love it. Well, does it feel like, so I know schedule rescheduling has been talked about, and that was sort of a big burst of news. And then people seem like they've almost forgotten about it. Not quite really, but it sort of feels like it's in the rearview mirror, even though again, it has not happened yet. But does it feel like we're at that point where the dam breaks? It's finally changed, finally hit that corner. We're finally here. It's different than it was. We were talking before about when we thought SAFE was going to go through and everyone was so sure and everything like that. Is it different than it's been in the past where we're actually seeing real change?
Yeah. I mean, this is monumental. It's a shift. You only see one. First of all, it should never have been Schedule 1. We all know that. And basically, the DEA slash the HHS, this has been acknowledged pretty openly. I think where it lives now in Schedule 3, or where it is proposed to live on Schedule 3, is a very important shift, because we are, and so from a business standpoint, actually not a lot of changes so far. What it will mean is, of course, the removal of 280E, the tax code that applies to our industry, which is important. That is very important, although many companies are already contesting that based on the lawsuit we're going to talk about and some other factors. But, I think from a business standpoint, it actually doesn't change a whole lot. From a sentiment standpoint and kind of what it represents at the federal level, I think it's monumental, and we should all take some time to really kind of bathe in the glory of that, because that's huge. The DEA basically has been empowered and emboldened around things like cannabis, criminalization. And we all know that was born out of a super racist policy and trying to control the the undercurrent of society, as the president at that time viewed it, which was really interesting, as I live in the Haight-Ashbury area of San Francisco, where a lot of that was coming out of. But all of that aside, it's really important, but we have to keep pushing on these other measures, because I think everybody saw the stocks went up a certain amount that day, over 20%, and then came right back down. And the reason for that is that there's no structural shift. I think it's combined with, it is June 3rd, so it is officially summer in the United States, which has typically been a quieter time in the markets in cannabis. And we don't have institutional capital yet. And we have already kind of this waiting period of 60 days. So I'm not surprised to see investors kind of thinking about where they could deploy some capital while they wait for the verdict. Because while those of us are long and are really invested in building these companies, people who trade in and out of these names are not necessarily up for these wild gyrations in the market until we get clear decisions.
That's true. And I think, unfortunately, the summer is going to be a little bit hectic and crazy because, like you're saying, it's sort of a quiet period in general. So with that, I think comes up a lot of rumors, a lot of different things like that that can kind of very easily move money around. Again, only a little bit of money needs to really move these stocks, significantly, I think, ultimately. Yeah. But again, when we're on the other side of that, that'll be good. Speaking of which, have you left your comment yet? What have you left? What would you include in it? What have you included in it?
I haven't yet, because I want to put together something incredibly thoughtful, and we've been really busy. I mean, one of the things we told our investors the day that the news came out was that kind of like the Stanley Tucci and the Devil Wears Prada, like, gird your loins. It's going to be a volatile time, and it has. There's a ton of rumors going around, a lot of speculation. We are trying to stay focused on what we can control, which is building the companies. I'm trying to put forth my thoughtful comment, and I will, of course, do so as I exercise every potential avenue to weigh in on this process. But have you done it?
I have not done it yet either. I'm also trying to think. I've seen some of them so far. I like them. I'm trying to think of, like, I also have a less personal story, I think, than you do. So I think that really is compelling. But I think I'm trying to find something that is succinct, because I don't know, I'm sure people are reading them, obviously, but I don't want it to be too long, basically. So I'm trying to get it to be very succinct, which I've had trouble with. I've heard a lot of people using ChatGPT, which I think technically works fine if you want to be able to put something together quickly and be able to get that, because I think getting it in is more important ultimately than, again, you want to do it well, but you want to make sure that it gets in. So I haven't either, but what? Yeah, we got time. We got time. All right, let's see. Yes, agree. El Guapo's putting in there in terms of the history of cannabis, which has been tough for sure. Yep. So, all right, well, perfect. Well, I'm looking forward to reading that comment when you have it in there as well. It'll be awesome. All right, well, then I would love to talk a little bit. Well, actually, I want to talk really quickly, public versus private, before we jump into the lawsuit. Any big changes, kind of any differences emerging as we're kind of in this period? Because I think you have great insight into both the public and private companies. You're getting all that data. Anything that's kind of emerging as a theme or any differences to pull out, or is it all what sort of has anything changed?
Has anything changed? No, I mean, what has changed is the areas of focus that we're seeing these companies dialing up. And frankly, we've talked about it. I talked about this with Ricky Sandler in the fall too. The thing that's exciting to me is that I think these companies' readiness for when institutional capital starts to come in is only improving. So while it's this kind of period where people haven't been looking so closely at cannabis, they just see the stock charts and get horrified. But real investors know there's opportunity when things like that happen. And so now that they're starting to pay attention, it's actually a fantastic time where the companies are focusing on how we're getting free cash flow, operational efficiency, things like that, that really warm the hearts of institutional long investors. And so and they're also cleaning up boards. Like Ascend just announced a new independent director, Julie Francis. She's actually incredible. I really would hope everyone would tune in on that because she's got a really interesting operational background, both in wine and spirits and in consumer. And I had an opportunity to meet her back when I was involved in the company. So I was very impressed by her. But, I think that those kinds of things like board, corporate governance, every little checkbox that makes a company ready for institutional capital, and like what Curaleaf and TerraSend have done in terms of where they're listed, Verano, where they're listed in Canada, all of those things are really meaningful. And so when institutional capital, which by the way, I did understand there were more institutional players at the table at the Canaccord conference a couple of weeks ago. I don't care if they're going to take a little time to move into the space. They're gathering information. So, what is it? Teddy Roosevelt said, there's no luck. There's just, the preparedness for a good opportunity when it comes along. So let's all make it look like we were lucky in a couple of months when things start to shift and be ready.
That's fair. Are the companies coming to you to kind of help them kind of tweak their institutional pitch decks or try to get lined up in that way? Or how are they sort of approaching it?
No, but they should, because I may seem like a nice person, but I'm pretty honest. So I'll put my hand up if no, not. Yeah. I shouldn't put my hand up. That would be insane. But if, I'd be happy to help, because I do think that, it was a bit of this industry, like any emerging market, was a little bit of a dog and pony show in the early days. And it was kind of a vaporware situation. But now we have real businesses and real metrics and real financials. So it's working. And that includes on the private side and the ancillary side. So, the preparedness for a good opportunity, to take advantage of a good opportunity, is really building at this time.
That's good. Also, for the record, I would say it is nice to be critical in some ways, especially if you're trying to help them and you're on their team ultimately. So I think that's not a negative thing.
Yeah. I believe that being honest is actually more respectful when someone's asking for it. Hasn't always read well, but whatever.
It helps you the most, I think. Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%. All right, let's see. I'm going to pull through these comments really quickly before we're going. Also, yes, El Guapo has already written my comment. I can just copy and paste this. Perfect.
So good.
So good. So concise. Very concise. All right, from Steven, just hit this first, and then I do want to get very much into the lawsuit and what's going on there. Any thoughts on, I guess, sort of smaller operators being able to, because it has been a long clock that's been running, which has been tough. Yeah. How do you think companies, or what separates a company that can compete in this time versus a company that might have a harder time?
I think it's many factors, but I think it's the quality of the assets, the control, SG&A containment. I think balance sheet considerations, all of those things will be, that's the duration game, right? I mean, that's why we are a little calmer maybe than some other folks, because in 2022, when the macro market also started to shake a little bit on venture funding and other things, and the IPO calendar started to seize up because it all started going sideways really fast. We had to your point, like the honest kind of come to Jesus with our founders. You've got to extend your time, do what you've got to do, but get to either extending time to 36 months, 40 months, or, focusing on a path to free cash flow. And if you can do it with growth, it's going to be good. So, I think those are the things that I think the companies that have exercised prudence in that time. I mean, obviously, like you have GTI as like the gold standard of shareholder value preservation and growth, and also balance sheet considerations. But there's other things, and it is a fine line because we are a growth industry, and so thinking about how you're allocating on capex and how that translates into growth and revenue. And productive revenue, as I like to call it, with solid gross margins, and good metrics around that, it all comes down to management. And so, you just, and every company is different. You have to look at the board of directors, you have to look at the management teams, the financial controls teams, and it's a balancing act. And and to me, it's also where the assets are located. Like, who's going to benefit from Ohio opening in about a month?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's true. Being access to those key markets is definitely important versus New York or Florida, maybe potentially.
Right.
It is funny. I think so much in cannabis is so specific to cannabis, but so much is also just any industry, any company. Of course, you want to focus on balance sheet. So important, management team, all those things kind of are pervasive across any industry, which makes sense. But thanks for the question, by the way, Stephen. All right. Well, then I would love to get into the lawsuit. Talk through your time in DC, which was what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that.
So we were actually in Springfield, Massachusetts for the case.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me hear.
So the case was brought. So this is the Boies-Schiller challenge to the Commerce Clause, which was the case heard in 2004 and decided upon in 2005. I've been working really closely with the MSOs and the named plaintiffs who've been involved in this for almost 2 years now. It all started with, actually, Boies-Schiller originated the discussion around this, which I've got to give them credit for. It was they were the ones who said, we're surprised no one's challenged this, given the shift in the landscape, the shift in the court, and everything. And so it's nice to be acknowledged and have someone of that caliber paying attention to what's going on in your industry after years of kind of like the headwinds we face. So Jason Wild especially and I set out to do a lot of vetting of different firms, and we spoke with everyone from Jones Day, who is an incredibly conservative firm, to we spoke to so many, sure, including we spoke to the lawyer who argued the case in front of the Supreme Court back in 2004. And what is interesting about all of this is that not one of those groups disagreed with the idea that this would be an interesting path to pursue. And we talked about working with other firms just because we knew it might be interesting to, for example, work with a really conservative law firm because of the optics of that. And because some people think that this still sits from a constituent standpoint on the more Democratic Party line, but we know that's not true. It's only in the old politicians sitting and holding us hostage in Congress that view that way. But from a constituent standpoint, this is as bipartisan as anything is in the United States.
I will also say, from talking to Don Murphy, it sounds like some of them are in tune, but are just a little nervous about coming forward publicly and having a view on it. I think there are some politicians that, even though they seem kind of old and out of touch, I think that they do recognize it, but are still worried. Again, that does state some outdatedness, but I think people
Then I have an intellect question for them. Do they know how to read polling data?
Yes. That is
I'm like, I have a zero page. You know why? And I'll tell you why. Because I have gone to the Hill many, many times. The lack of respect that our industry receives, it has improved. And I will say, I'll call out some of our champions like Senator Daines. Mm-hmm. Senator Daines is highly respectful and understands the bill. I mean, he's an incredibly informed politician. I met with many other people, and I was dismayed not only by kind of the jokes about cannabis, but also the lack of understanding of actually what's in SAFE at the time, SAFER now. It's just, I just feel like that's like, you have one job, which is to make laws. So know the laws that you're reviewing. So this is 10 plus years of suffering at the hands of this. But where I'm going with that is important because what we have. So we've got multiple things, right? And right now in the United States, we enjoy the beauty of our checks and balances. We have the executive, we have the legislative, we have the judicial. And we have not pulled the lever of the judicial branch with this level of law firms supporting us, with this level of industry support. This is truly important. And the reasons for that are, we don't know what's going to happen in this presidential election. People are speculating wildly about how Trump might feel about this versus Biden, and what might happen with rescheduling, or what might happen with the new AG, because many of us who've been around have had to go through having memos rescinded and FinCEN guidance removed. It wasn't pretty when that happened, and we're still kind of experiencing what that feels like to live in a world without those structures around us. So even if the AG should put forth something now, we don't know what will happen to it come January, February. So that is concerning. But when you work through the judicial process, you are creating laws. It does change the way things are handled. And because we have these great checks and balances, that does protect around things if it goes through the judicial branch. So, so that's why this is so important. And essentially what it is the case was brought in Massachusetts. If anyone hasn't read about it, it's really important because it does essentially say that the CSA is overreaching and interfering with businesses. And the hearing that day was incredible in Springfield, to hear the way our lawyers articulate how this does not just impact the individual businesses, but the people who want to support our businesses, such as banking and credit cards.
Yeah.
And the way this would change our entire business profile of our industry if we had those resources, that's like 280, huge. Unlocking banking and credit card processing for our industry, monumental.
Yeah.
And that goes from everything from capital markets to just day-to-day business operations, to the rate of credit that we have on our businesses, all of those things. So this would put real protection around it. The judge was incredibly prepared. The DOJ was incredibly prepared. But I would say that being in the room listening to David Boies argue the case, and I was there with Laura from Verano, with the TerraSend team, with the Ascend team, it was incredible. And hearing someone argue on behalf of our industry at that level was really, really exciting. So, this is important, and it does. Some people are like, oh, well, it takes time. Well, we still don't have banking. And by the way, like, I know some people say we'll have it in 2024. I'm on the outside of that. I think 2025. And it has nothing, by the way, from the work I've done in DC, it has nothing to do with SAFER at this point. Actually, it sounds like they buttoned up the issues. It's more of a lack of action that will be achieved through this Congress because of election year dynamics and machinations. So all of that is, so when we talk about a time horizon, the pressure of moving this through a court system is important, and the outcome of it could be important because, again, even if we get a memo, even if we get this banking reform, I mean, we need to have protection around the way our industry is treated, because at Schedule 3, we're still federally illegal.
Yes, that is true. It doesn't make it, it doesn't make it fully illegal. It just makes it less illegal, I guess, ultimately moves it down the schedule.
We need all of these things to protect our industry. Yeah.
We needed them about 10 years ago, but we're working on it now. And I think it's good that, again, it's great that you're doing it as sort of a united front, which is fantastic. And kind of taking it into your own hands, because you're right. Who knows if SAFER gets any sort of progress made, but you're actually on the path to get those steps done, which is fantastic. Has it helped at all that since starting this, I don't think Ohio was in the mix, really more of a kind of mixed conservative state. Is any of that stuff kind of helping push things forward, kind of adding to the case at all? How is that? How is things evolving, scheduling evolving, kind of helping bolster the case, or does it have no real impact?
No, it's interesting because the judge had many, many questions about the impact of scheduling news on the outcome of the case. I think it's all directionally pointing to, so if you think about it, when the case was heard in 2004 and decided in 2005, there was no commercial market around cannabis. There were the mutual benefit companies, there were the caregiver organizations in California. We have actual commerce around cannabis now. Business is being done interstate, as recognized by these state laws, and it's trackable. There's a lot of things that have changed. And so to answer your question, yes, I think all of those things have helped in terms of the groundswell around this case. And I think it's why Justice Thomas wrote a dictum kind of inviting this back to the court. So important and foundational fact. And, even the judge asked questions about, for example, the Dobbs case, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And, no matter how some of us or many of us might feel about that, what it does is it does show there were some important kind of patterns to pull out of that case in terms of how this court might evaluate this, the Commerce Clause at this time. So,
How so specifically?
Mhm.
How so specifically?
There's kind of the state versus federal aspect to it. There's also and that would tie into the Obamacare cases. That also ties into the DraftKings case, which is an important analog. And if you want to look at a business changing after the outcome of a court case, look at DraftKings. That's a perfect example of like a similar outcome. But on Dobbs, there was this really interesting question about fundamental rights that are defined by our Constitution. And it's like something that was available to us and recognized by us at the outset of the formation of our country. And Dobbs argued that this was not a fundamental right. And they kind of outlined the timeline on it, that it became a fundamental right when Roe versus Wade occurred. And then there was the relative short timeline versus the duration of our nation. And then so that was not necessarily considered a fundamental right. Now, boys, and I loved the way that Jonathan Schiller called it. He said he like put a prism on it, and he articulated that this actually was because cannabis existed with our forefathers in this country, was grown on their land. Now, it may have been like hemp as we define things now, but it was also cannabis, which was taken medicinally. And it was only very recently, if you look at the history of our country, pulled back into Schedule 1 by the DEA in the 70s, and we all know the racist origins of that. So he flipped that, and that was really interesting. It was interesting to watch the judge process that prismatic approach to fundamental rights.
Prismatic. I like that. That's very cool. Multidimensional. I feel like it hits it on all angles, which is true.
Yeah.
Right? Good stuff.
Yeah.
Also, yes, that is true. Did you ever have to do DARE growing up?
Oh my God, okay, girl.
Oh, no.
I was a joiner. I was a leader in high school. I was like, I am getting myself into the college I want to get to.
Sure.
So I was like the chair of the DARE program. I did a DARE dance.
Oh,
I mean, I was born in the era of Nancy Reagan's eggs in a pan. This is your brain on drugs.
wow.
I had a lot of cognitive dissonance around that because my father was a hippie who grew his own cannabis, was in the Woodstock movie.
Yeah.
He didn't really drink. Cannabis would have been his preferred thing, but I know he was always really worried about the negative stigma around it for our family. But all of that aside, cognitive dissonance reigned supreme in my brain during that time. But let's face it, I was doing it for the resume, not for the...
Fair enough. And the leadership quality, I feel like you're just always in it, wanting to do it, which is great. Take the lead, which is awesome. And yeah, I think people can change. People can evolve, and people can move beyond DARE, which is good. The DARE dance is wild. I wonder how that went.
I mean, DARE. Yeah. I think it had, well-laid plans of mice and men, but, and also, it's like the old, if not me, who, if not now, when, so let's go fix it and change it. But yeah.
Okay. That's good stuff. Okay. Well, then I guess to round out the conversation on the lawsuit and everything, next steps, what sort of things that people should be looking out for updates as this kind of goes along?
So we are now waiting for the opinion from the judge about whether or not, so this was a motion to dismiss case. The DOJ tried to argue that this should be dismissed for a couple of reasons, which was actually, from my point of view, kind of contradictory. And I'm a lay person. I'm just spending all the time asking all the questions. But one of the things they argued is that there's no harm to these businesses based on the CSA, which is like, please, like, here come the litany of harms caused to these businesses, especially, I was involved in I've spoken with the named plaintiffs many times. They are so awesome. And I recommend people check out their businesses. Canna Provisions, Giassi Cellars. You have Wiseacre Farms. Wiseacre, the farmer, showed up in his farming clothes because he was busy that day. He's so awesome. And they're growing good. I think they're growing good weed out there. But, when you hear about the challenges in the big businesses a lot because they're the public companies, you hear about it on the calls. When you talk to smaller businesses, it's like times 100 what they have gone through in terms of the banking, the lending, all of the things. It just makes their life so much harder. And I have to give it to the small business owners because first of all, I love small business. I think it is the most American thing we have, and I love it infinitely. But just to hear the challenges and the kind of the horrors they've suffered at the hands of the overreach of the CSA into their state operating businesses is crazy.
Yeah.
Where I'm going with this, what was the question?
I was so thinking about the farmer's uniform that I just totally blanked out.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, but so we're waiting on what the judge. Oh, so the motion to dismiss. As Boy Schiller said, look, we took this case because it's a hard case.
Sure.
And, I know some people have been critical of hiring a top tier law firm, but I will say they've been incredible and they are very passionate about this and they're meeting us on this. So they do this when I think they have a perspective that something's really important. And I think that's one of the great things about lawyers is when they see, David Boies is one of the most successful constitutional lawyers of our time. So I think they love the challenge. They get the bit between their teeth. But so we're waiting now from an opinion from the judge on whether or not he will uphold the motion to dismiss. There's other things we'll be submitting, like, for example, what's going on in New Mexico. That's a perfect example of the federal government overreaching into a state-run program with the seizing of product without any accounting for the seizing of product and for like the threatening of the humans who are transporting that product legally and following the rules. So there's a lot of things that are kind of building momentum around this case. And so we'll hear about his opinion on a motion to dismiss and probably where he thinks this case, if he should agree that it should not be dismissed, where it should be heard. So I'm hopeful. It was almost 2 full hours. The only reason he stopped the hearing was because he had another case coming in. So came incredibly well prepared, had clearly read everything. And I think that's a positive sign that this was taken very seriously.
Yeah, so they legitimately care and want to recognize it. That's great.
Yeah.
Any ways that people can help support, whether that's sort of echoing the message, kind of any sort of things there that would help as well?
Yes, we need all the support we can on funding the case. It's a heavy lift, but we have a lot of heavy lifts right now in the industry. We have the Florida initiative on 3, which is monumentally important. We have that's the other really, I think, and then there's going to be the work around defending Schedule 3 once we start to see what Sam puts up, which is pretty predictable, I think, at this point. But they do have a pretty strong the burden is on them to show harm on Schedule 3. So that's going to be a lot of hard work on their part. Not that they're not noisy and unbelievably inaccurate in the things that they say and say loudly with conviction in the reality TV world that we live in. But, I think we have some great lawyers who are probably rolling up their sleeves preparing to support this for the industry's behalf. But the attach.org has a platform where you can donate to the case. I invite everybody who's interested in this outcome to please join us in this. It is a heavy lift and we do need to continue to support it because we want to bring in some really useful resources like amicus briefs and other groups. There's a lot of aspects to this, but we do have broader support outside of cannabis on this issue. And so that'll start to come to light as we push the case forward.
That sounds good. Again, a lot of the time it takes a community to kind of pull something together, and especially something that has taken a lot of work to get across is it takes help sometimes.
Yeah. Great. And if anyone's, interested but hasn't figured it out, just message me on Twitter.
Perfect.
Or X. Sorry.
I'm going to still call it Twitter or X. I do both every so often. Who knows? All right. Real quick, final thing. So I think that's great. El Guapo is bringing up all the hemp stuff, which I guess we didn't hit in the first half, but what's your thought on the sort of closing the loophole? He's saying he's a little bit conflicted on the hemp side of things. Let's see. second half, but here we are, Farm Bill getting marked up, Schedule 3 looking likely, banning substances goes against my libertarian ideals, but I don't want untested Delta 8 vape pens in schools. Where do you
Yeah, no, I don't want that either. No, where I fall on this is that I think that anything that is quote unquote intoxicating should live in an adult use world through the same. So I'm not even saying it has to be sold through dispensaries, but it has to go through the same rigorous protocols that we do. It should be tested so you know what's in it, just like anything a human should consume. It should be for 21 and plus, and so therefore it has to go through better channels because we know those vape shops are not testing or not checking IDs. We know this. Any cannabis operators who are selling intoxicating hemp products should be doing age verification. I know that some are not, and I'm looking at you. And all of that is to protect us as a broader industry, and not just because fine, if you want to do intoxicating hemp, do it, but do it the right way and make sure that you're not creating headline risk or actual risk for the industry, because anyone who lived through VapeGate knows what happens when the illicit market products create a negative halo effect on the legal industry. You just have to look at the vape data during that time to see what it did to what is really, in Gen Z, the largest category of cannabis consumption from a product standpoint. So it took it down for a while, and we had to work really hard to come back from that. But it was also just more fodder against the industry when in fact it was just illegal vape pens that were the real problem. So I just think it should be going, and by the way, should be taxed. And look, if the credit card companies are aware of what's going on, then they should apply the same challenges that we have to face. It's all the same. It's just a plant. The plant doesn't know what it's being used for in the end. So it should be treated the same. But I'm a huge, by the way, Guap, I'm the same. Like, I am like a pretty libertarian person in my heart in terms of the overreach of the government, but I just think it needs to be safer for everybody so it doesn't create an issue.
For anyone.
Yeah. And but for what it's worth, I'm also then a huge fan of industrial hemp for uses of textiles, fibers, things like that. And that's something we've been working on for years. And I think that hemp is an incredible plant, and I'm happy people have access to it in markets where they don't have full legal adult use programs, but I just want it to be good for them. I want them to have the good stuff.
I think that's good, or have a good experience with it as well. Because I feel like in a state like Texas, for example, we've talked a lot about where they have very, very limited access in general. If they're getting their first experiences through Delta 8 and it is untested, or it is sort of a sketchier kind of first experience, you might be totally turned off from the industry as well from that perspective. But I think overall, you described it well, kind of just a very common sense approach. Just sort of have some basic rules in place and go from there ultimately, which makes sense. I love it. Love some common sense in the cannabis space, which is great. Love it. All right. Well, pragmatism, yeah, a basic approach, which is great. I mean, it's the whole common sense is not always so common thing, I guess. So ultimately, who knows? All right. Well, Emily, thanks so much for being on. Thanks for starting your Monday off. I know it's early there as well. I know you're in California, so appreciate you doing the nooner/niner over there. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, thank you for continuing to hold this forum so we can discuss things in detail, because X is a great platform to disseminate information, but it's pithy. So it's nice to have this dialogue. So thank you for your good questions.
Of course. Appreciate all the hard work that you continue to do. Definitely take a look at supporting the lawsuit on X, everyone who's out there, and we will catch you next time. Thanks so much.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at advisorshares.com.